I couldn't help but start the video off with that clip because, well, for one, it's hilarious, and two, it's the perfect intro for today's video, because on this edition of Dragon Ball Dictionary, I'm going to be answering whether the Destructo Disc is a mistranslation. Let's get into it. Hey guys, I'm Tony, and here on the YouTube channel, I like to use my knowledge of the Japanese language to break down anime and especially Dragon Ball. So if you're into that kind of thing, then make sure to hit that subscribe button. The Destructo Disc, or as it's known in the original Japanese, the Kienzan, is Krillin's signature technique. With its ability to cut through just about anything, including opponents, this technique allowed Krillin to be a threat even to enemies who were significantly stronger than him. But as interesting as the Destructo Disc Kienzan is, we're not really here to talk about the technique itself. What we're here to talk about is its name. Outside of English-speaking regions that got the English dubs of Dragon Ball Z, pretty much everybody knows this technique as the Kienzan, like I said, the original Japanese name. But what does this mean? Well, actually, it's a very straightforward name. So let's break it down. Kienzan is made up of 3 kanji characters. Each one has its own meaning, so let's go one by one. First up, we have ki. And if you're watching this video, I think you're already pretty well aware of what ki is, but basically it's the internal energy that living things have inside them, and this is the same energy that the characters in Dragon Ball harness in order to do all the crazy things that they do, such as shoot beams from their hands and create the Kienzan. Next up, we have in. Generally speaking, this kanji can have 2 meanings, round or money. Interestingly, this is the same kanji used when you're talking about the Japanese yen. So in English, we say yen, but actually in Japanese, it's pronounced en. And when you write this in Japanese, you use this character. So for example, 100 yen in Japanese would be 100 yen. As for why this kanji character has these 2 very different meanings, round and the unit of money used in Japan, well, that history goes back to China, and it seems to basically just come down to the fact that coins are round. But that doesn't really matter for our purposes. What matters is that the Kienzan is flat and round like a coin, so this works out perfectly. And then finally we have zan. The core meaning of this kanji is to cut, but really it goes a bit deeper than that. A more precise translation would be something like to slice off or to cut off. For example, this character is used in kanji compound words like zanshu, which means to decapitate or behead, and zangeki, which means a slashing attack. Unlike the other 2 characters in Kienzan, this one isn't used all that often in daily life in Japan. I mean, it's not really all that surprising because we don't normally talk about slashing and beheading in daily life. It's got a very samurai kind of vibe to it. And so you do end up seeing it a lot in media where swords are involved, such as video games. For example, this kanji is used quite a bit in the video game Samurai Showdown. Specifically, the character Haomaru has multiple attacks with names that have this kanji. So put this all together and you could say that Kienzan means something like a round thing made of ki that cuts things off or slashes things. Now that we know what Kienzan actually means in the original Japanese, we can answer the question, is Destructo Disc a mistranslation? And I am going to talk in a more general sense about the localization process, whether it should have been changed to Destructo Disc and all that stuff in just a moment. But first I want to answer this question. Does it match up with the original Japanese? No, it does not. It is a mistranslation because destroy, and destroy is where destructo comes from, right? Destroy doesn't mean the same thing as slash, cut off, behead, right? Those are 2 different things. Yeah, there's a little bit of overlap there, but to destroy something and to slash, to cut off something are not the same thing. But there's more to say on this topic because what I want to focus on now is whether they should have changed it in the first place, right? When they were bringing Dragon Ball over from Japan to the US and English-speaking countries, did they really have to change it to Destructo Disc? Should they have left it as Kienzan? In order to answer that, we have to think about why they changed it in the first place. And really, it all comes down to marketing. When Dragon Ball Z was brought over to the US in the latter part of the 90s, obviously they wanted to make it as accessible as possible for kids and their parents, because remember, the parents are the ones that buy the toys. The parents are the ones that buy the home videos and the DVDs and all the other merchandise. And the reality is that Kienzan is a tricky word for English speakers to pronounce. The trickiest part is the Kien part. If I were to show Kienzan to a native English speaker who doesn't speak Japanese or other foreign languages and is not familiar with Dragon Ball, I think there's a very high chance that they would mispronounce that first part. They might pronounce it as Kienzan or Kienzan or something like that. It would sound very, very different from the original Japanese. And because they have no idea what it means, it would also be very tricky for them to remember it without hearing it a bunch of times. And even if they were to hear it, there's still a very good chance that they would mispronounce it.
Kienzan!
So I totally see the reasoning for why it was changed. Now, does that mean that I think Kienzan should have stayed as Kienzan in the English dub and Destructo Disc is absolutely horrible? Well, before you start commenting and complaining, give me a moment, because I want to tell you a little story about how the Latin American dub localized Kienzan. As I mentioned earlier, it's pretty commonplace outside of English-speaking countries to refer to the Destructo Disc as the Kienzan, and the Latin American dub does exactly that. They kept it as the original Japanese. But here's the thing. They introduced a mispronunciation. There's actually a slight mistake in how the voice actor pronounces it. Here's a clip of Krillin from the Latin American dub saying Kienzan. Just in case you didn't notice what the mispronunciation was, here's a few clips of Spanish speakers pronouncing Kienzan.
Que se llama Kienzan, el disco destructor.
El Kienzan es...
¿Sabías que el Kienzan es capaz?
El Kienzan es una...
Every single one of these clips makes the same exact mistake. And that mistake is that they're pronouncing the Z sound in zun as sun, like an S sound. This is because, generally speaking, Spanish speakers tend to pronounce the Z and the S as the same. They pronounce it as an S sound. And so you end up with Kienzan instead of Kienzan. Note, I want to be very clear here. I'm not making fun of Spanish speakers. I'm not making fun of people who learn English as a second language. We're all influenced by our native language, and that results in accents when we try to speak a different language. It's totally normal and nothing to be ashamed of. Now, in case you're thinking this is super nitpicky and it's not a big deal, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. But I bring it up because to the Japanese ear, it is an important distinction. For example, the phrase or word zannen. This means something like what a shame or shame. And then there's the phrase sannen. This means 3 years. The only difference between these two examples is the Z sound in zannen and the S sound in sannen. So when you pronounce something that should be pronounced with a Z sound with an S sound, Japanese people will almost certainly notice. The reason why I bring up this example is just to show that even when you keep a name as close as possible to the original Japanese, that doesn't guarantee that the people in the target audience are going to pronounce it exactly like a Japanese person would. But is that enough of a reason to change the name to Destructo Disc, something that is significantly different? Look, I actually don't hate the term Destructo Disc. I think that the two Ds, the Destructo Disc and that Destructo spelling there, I think it makes it really fun and memorable to say. I'm sure that many kids over the years have had fun saying it and using it when playing with their friends. So I don't think this is a horrible localization. And I have to admit that if I was the one putting my money on the line back in the 90s, trying to make Dragon Ball Z into a popular new IP in the United States, I would certainly consider changing the name Kienzan for the reasons I already stated, and Destructo Disc is certainly not the worst possible choice. On the other hand, of course, I already talked about how destroy doesn't mean slash, so that's not great. And also, Destructo Disc sounds more like something you might see in a Mega Man game or in some kind of shooting game, rather than in Dragon Ball Z, which is very much about martial arts. And on top of that, by the time Dragon Ball Z came out, a lot of kids, at least the ones who played video games, were already familiar with Hadouken. Krillin. So introducing a new Japanese technique name, I don't think would have been that big of a deal. Yeah, it was a little bit of a complicating factor, but I don't think that would have been something that would have prevented Dragon Ball Z from becoming as crazy popular as it ended up being. So yes, I understand why it's Destructo Disc, and again, I don't think it's an absolutely horrible localization, but I do wish that they would have kept it as Kienzan. Regardless though, Destructo Disc is the official English term. I use it sometimes, and Kienzan is the Japanese term. I also use it. It just depends on who I'm talking to. So as I always say, whichever one you use, it's totally fine. Just don't be an asshole about it. Thank you so much for all your support, guys. Of course, there's more videos coming, but if you haven't checked out my other videos, you may want to check out the one that's on screen right now. It's about whether Krillin is a mistranslation. I'll see you in the next one.